the invite, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is a session on Copilot for security. Using Copilot, and obviously when you talk to a Microsoft person these days, you're going to hear the word Copilot come out of their mouth almost immediately, either Copilot or AI. So I hope I'm pretty sure that majority of you have not seen Copilot for security in action. If the majority of you have, I would be super happy to hear that. However, there's a good chance you haven't. So hopefully today's session will be of value to you. This session is leveraging Copilot for enhanced security with Defender XDR and Microsoft Purview. And while this session will focus more primarily on the XDR, Defender XDR piece of that, we will talk about Microsoft Purview for Copilot for security. We'll talk toward the end, we have some additional capabilities coming out for Microsoft Purview that should be out here within the next quarter or so. So I think that should be of interest to everyone as well. So just really quickly, just about me, I'm not going to go through this whole slide. These are the things I like to do, the things that are me, inherently me, not just my professional, but also personal life. We don't have a lot of time together today to talk about all the things I want to talk about. So like I said, I'm not going to cover this and just hesitate here for just a second, just to tell you that I'm a very public person. So if you have questions today that we're not able to answer, maybe you watch this as a replay or whatever it happens to be, and you want to get in contact with me, it's very easy to do. Really easy over Twitter or X or whatever they want to call it these days. But I think primarily LinkedIn would probably be the best way to connect with me. If you have questions, you have feedback, you might find Copilot for security might potentially have some issues you'd like to work around. I'm happy to work with you with those as well and potentially get you to the right people at Microsoft that would be able to accomplish that. Here's some other ways to connect with me. Every day or weekly, we have a weekly podcast. I think some of you are very aware of that, but those are the ways to get in connection with me, and I would be super happy to connect with you. So here's what I would like to do in our discussion today. Again, hoping that we can kind of keep this within the time frame that we have today. This is a large topic, and I apologize again for my voice. This is a large topic, and I've kind of tried to whittle this down into something that I think will be of value to everyone on here today in the time that we have. But here's where I'd like to get to today. This is the agenda. Number one, what is Copilot for security? Not just our Copilots, but this one very specific to security. Explore kind of the fundamental definition and the purpose of what it is. Then why it exists, obviously. Why was this thing created? Why does it exist today? Why does Microsoft believe this is something that's going to provide ultimate value for us in our security operations? Little peek under the hood to show you, or not show you, but tell you about how it works, how we go from a prompt to a response, and some of that back-end mechanism and what that looks like. So you kind of get an understanding. This is the way Copilot for security works. This is kind of how all of our Copilots work in relation to working with generative AI. But very specifically, Copilot for security, there's some additional things that we go through, particularly for the security piece, to ensure that this thing is absolutely fantastic at security and security scenarios. Then we'll jump into and talk about the two different experiences for Copilot for security. There's two experiences, and we'll detail that as we go along. And then we'll end our discussion today, and there's some demos throughout, but end our discussion today talking about Copilot for security as an extensible platform. And to me, this is where I think, other than our threat intelligence that's built in, I think this is probably one of those key factors to me where I think this is the ultimate value for Copilot for security as you start to want to use it and integrate it into your existing services, existing tools, and your existing operations and procedures for security within your organization. So hopefully that fits, and that was of interest, and our discussion will be of interest to all of you today. Again, I'm Rod Trent, Senior Program Manager at Microsoft. If you want to get in touch with me with any of this, this is literally my 100% daily job is working with Copilot for security. So I've been through various roles at Microsoft, and in each role, I focused on a very specific area within our product teams, and this is my area of forte at the moment, Copilot for security. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Like I said, we don't have a lot of time today, so let's quickly dive into what Copilot for security is. I wouldn't be a person from Microsoft unless I covered the Microsoft perspective of what we believe at Microsoft Copilot for security is and the value that it represents. I'm going to give you the Microsoft perspective, and then I'm going to give you what I think is the more real world perspective. So just hold on to your seat for that while I go through kind of the Microsoft perspective. All right. So just to get started with our discussion, let's understand what Microsoft believes Copilot for security actually represents. Okay. It's a generative AI powered security solution or tool that is intended to help increase the efficiency and the capabilities of defenders or security people, or even non-security people, which we'll talk about shortly, to help improve those security outcomes. And we at Microsoft kind of refer to this and its ability to do this at machine speed and scale. Obviously, some marketing terms there, right? But in relation to what it is, it absolutely is. There's a lot of power that goes on in the back end to ensure that something like Copilot for security is going to be as good as we hope it is, to be able to offer the value and features that for security individuals. So it provides that natural language, right? Everybody talks about generative AI and how it utilizes natural language input to produce natural language output. Like all of our other copilots, it's an assistive experience. It's not a tool that's going to take over. It's not the only tool that you're ever going to use for security. Would not be a nice world if you only had to use one tool. But it is, as it represents in the name, a copilot. It's an assistant, all right? And it's intended to empower not just security professionals, but even those lone defenders to respond to threats quickly, process signals, which we'll talk about here shortly, what signals are, and then assess risk or potential risk exposure for the environment in minutes versus I know I mentioned, it's the reason why I mentioned this earlier, that I've been focused on many different products at Microsoft. Prior to Copilot for security, I was hyper focused on Sentinel. Microsoft Sentinel is our SIEM tool, and I know the power of Sentinel and how that improved the lives of many security organizations by increasing the efficiency and improving operations. But Copilot for security actually increases and improves that efficiency even greater. All right. So this is an innovative tool. This is September of, I forget the actual date now. It's been a actual product for just a little over a year, right? Based on generative AI, based on the latest GPT-4 models, right? A lot of people have been, and I'll tell you, it's very new, but it was first to market. If we're at Black Hat this week, don't know if many of you were, or you heard any of the stories that come out of Black Hat. Copilot for security was the first to market for this, so we have kind of a head start, but all of our competitors have looked at what we're doing with Copilot security and they determined that they want to do something similar. So there's a lot of stories coming out from Black Hat this week about all of those other organizations trying to hustle to create their own thing. So this is actually more than a novel idea. This is something that I think is absolutely taking hold and people are super interested. Now, as I said, that was the Microsoft perspective. This is my favorite perspective, actually. This is not Microsoft, not something Microsoft paid for, not something that we influenced or enhanced in any way. But I love when our customers, or even when the press, talk about the things that we do in such a positive light. So this is the non-Microsoft view, in my opinion, of Copilot for security. And this is a great example. Obviously, we have customers that rave about it, but this is like one of my favorite quotes. So Copilot for security has received praise from external sources, such as you can see here. And there's a QR code if you want to scan that. You can go read that article. But this is my favorite quote about Copilot for security, just Very soon after Copilot for Security was released publicly, April 1st of this past year. Yes, April Fool's Day. This quote came out from Lance Ulanoff from Tech Radar. And if you know the history, normally Tech Radar is not a huge fan of Microsoft, and they're never super positive. There's always some kind of negative spin to it, but this was great. And I thought this was, wow, Tech Radar is talking about Copilot for Security. So you can see here that they talk about the ability to address the security personnel talent shortage, which we'll get to and talk a little bit more here shortly as well, but act as sort of a fast security consultant. So I'm just going to read that for those listening in, maybe working, doing other things. Lance says this: Microsoft Copilot for Security acts as a sort of intense and ultra-fast security consultant able to read through complex hash files and scripts to divine their true intent and quickly recognize both known threats and things that act like existing threats. Microsoft claims that using such a service could help address the security personnel talent shortage. Now, I don't know about you. I'm a writer, and I write things, blog posts and articles, white papers and stuff all the time. That's part of my role at Microsoft. But I could not have written that better. So I'm kind of super jealous, but I totally appreciate that. So you can see that, right? So the Microsoft side of it, kind of fluff, marketing, but then there's this media personality, Lance Ulanoff, who's wrote this. And I think that is great because I think he really does see what he extrapolates out exactly what we were trying to accomplish with this. All right. Microsoft Threat Intelligence. You probably heard this to no end over the past several years, but it arguably, I think Microsoft probably has the best threat intelligence on the planet. Threat intelligence is critically important to any organization working with security because it gives you the unknowns. It answers the unknowns about the potential threats that exist out there. All right. So imagine this vast digital landscape where every interaction, every anomaly, every whisper of a potential threat leaves a trace or a signal, right? So these signals through Microsoft Threat Intelligence are scoured and looked through and sifted and collated and fed back into all of our existing security tools and systems so that our customers, we at Microsoft use these ourselves, but our customers actually have access to the things that we actually use. And when you look at, and the number always continues to increase, but right now, at last count, it's literally 65 trillion daily signals. So there's application is run, endpoint is utilized, an account is accessed. Within each of those threads, there's a stream of a signal that is identified, captured, and determine whether or not it might be a potential threat, right? And the ones that are, they're fed back into the system so that all of our security systems know about this. The important thing here to understand based on our topic for Copilot for Security today is Copilot for Security is based on and built on the intelligence from that Microsoft threat, from those 65 trillion daily signals. So when you query or you prompt or you ask Copilot for Security questions, those responses are going to be super intelligent based on what that Microsoft and threat intelligence knows, based on that feed. And that is part of Copilot for Security. So I mentioned earlier, there's two things that I really love and I think are super valuable and important about Copilot for Security. We'll get to the second one as we close out our discussion about that security platform and extensibility. But this, the Microsoft Threat Intelligence piece, I think is huge. Imagine having a tool, one single tool that pulls in everything from your environment and you're able to query about your environment and it's going to apply that intelligence to that response, right? That's super, super powerful. So why does Copilot for Security exist? Obviously, at Microsoft, due to how things work, how policies, budgets, products, things like this, we don't just create things in a vacuum. We don't just, well, I can't say we don't ever, but we don't create things because we just, like messing around with things. Most of the things that we accomplish or try to accomplish at Microsoft are based on very real world scenarios or metrics or stats, or more importantly, feedback from our customers. And from a security perspective, we are always continually trying to identify ways that we can help our customers better secure themselves. So Copilot for Security exists today. Why? Because of this. If you look at these numbers in here, you'll kind of get a quick understanding of what this is. All right, so this is super important. This last one is, to me, one of the most important things, but we'll talk about that here shortly. So there are still, and this number, for whatever reason, never changes. The attackers are always on the attack, right? 4,000 password attacks per second. How do we know? Going back to the discussion we just had about that Microsoft threat intelligence, that is part of that threat intel. We know based on what how our products are being used and how we identify those signals, we know that there are around or up to 4,000 password attacks per second. So there is always a threat actor out there somewhere trying to guess or brute force a password, because we all know that if an attacker can get access to that password, depending on whose password, if it happens to be an admin's password, ultimately, we're in dire straits. Even a user password who doesn't have administrator rights, they have access to something important within that organization. And if they can gain access to that account, that attacker can gain access to things that could be vitally important to that organization, or used as malware or ransomware or something like that, right? 72 minutes, remember that number. That's the time it takes once an attacker has gained access for them to actually access private data through a phishing email. So phishing email comes in, user may not, we know how end users are, they may not use the best in techniques. They may look at an email, it may look so super real, they may click on something, and the minute that they click on something and supply information, maybe that attacker might potentially have access. It literally takes 72 minutes or less to gain access to information that that attacker actually wanted to get so that they can use it in some respect. But again, I mentioned, I think the most important thing to me, the reason why Copilot exists, I think is super valuable, is because of the talent shortage in cybersecurity in this industry. We are still short for actual cybersecurity talent, and utilizing, and we'll talk about here shortly, Copilot for Security, it enables even those people who are just IT pros and not security people, or IT pros that are still responsible for security, but they have all these other jobs that they still have to accomplish, but still are required to ensure that the environment is secure. It gives them the ability to be a team. It seemed like a team more than just that lone defender. So that's super important. So we can do all that we can at Microsoft. We can invest so much money into these skillings and these certifications and these requirements. But at the end of the day, most people still need to do this security job. And a lot of these people don't have the ability or the time to become a hardened security or a expertise in security. So having a co-pilot or assistant come alongside to help with that job is super important. So Copilot for Security can help in this respect. We talked about that deeper understanding, utilizing that threat intelligence, helping develop faster response times. Even if you're an expert in security and you generally have a methodology of how you approach things, whether it's hunting or analyzing existing alerts, you have a methodology and you go through this process, but this process actually helps you do that quicker, right? Type something in, here's the response, here's how you might potentially remediate or how you might approach this situation. It also empowers teams, but at the same time, again, I think this is super key. And another reason why I think Copilot for Security is super important. Imagine, if you will, so not only do I write blogs, post white papers, but I'm also a fiction writer. So I always have these stories in my head trying to figure out how to apply this, in more of a creative way. So imagine, if you will, solitary watchtower on top of this rugged cliff, right? So our cybersecurity professionals often find themselves kind of in this similar position on top of this cliff, look down over the cliff, and you have these defenders. They're all trying to imagine they're, I don't know, zombies or something. I don't know. But that person, those cybersecurity professionals, they're the guardians of these digital realms, right? Trying to stand alone sometimes against these threats. But what if you could amplify your capabilities, right? What if you could operate like an entire team? We're not all fortunate enough to be part of a security team that is, 50 person security team, or part of one of those large organizations where you have multiple offices and you have a security team in each one, and you have all these big brains trying to help with these security issues. Um, Copilot for Security can help in this way where it becomes a force multiplier for even that one person, that one IT person that still needs to focus on security while they're still doing their normal and daily job of helping their end users and ensuring that their endpoints are managed and working, right? So to kind of reiterate what we talked about before, Microsoft Threat Intelligence provides kind of the fuel for this, right? Imagine again those 65 trillion signals, each a breadcrumb, each signal a breadcrumb that is left by an adversary. How do you find those breadcrumbs? Copilot for Security actually harnesses that threat intelligence, that vast intelligence that's provided as part of it to produce actionable insights. So you ask it a question. Is this thing potentially an issue in my environment? Can you find this thing within my environment? And it's going to respond with that information. And so even that lone sentinel becomes almost seemingly like a team. And considering that this is the AI world, or the generative AI world, where we, not only us as defenders, are thinking about generative AI, those attackers are using generative AI to create their tools, to make themselves more intelligent, to maybe potentially access some other threat intelligence to figure out how to work around these things. So we absolutely need to be able to use a tool like this. We need to fight tool against tool in that respect. So how does Copilot for Security work? Looking at the time here, yeah, we're doing pretty good. So now, how does Copilot for Security work? Let's dig into that really quickly. I do want to hustle just a little bit because we do have some demos. So to better understand how Copilot for Security works, let's walk through how the process works. All right. So it begins with a prompt. Right. So you ask it a question. And again, this is not the old search engine world. This is not where you try to type in as few words as possible to get results that you're going to have to go ahead and manually vet yourself. So you're going to have to spend that extra time at the back end. No, if you ask the right question, you're going to get the right response, and you're going to get the right response the first time. So you actually ask it a question. You treat this interaction like it's a one-to-one in-person conversation. And when you do that, you're going to get better responses. But we do some things on the back end to help ensure that even if you ask kind of a small, terse question, you're going to get a better response. All right. So it begins with the prompt. Prompt is submitted. That initiates this next sequence of events. So then we have what's called an orchestrator, takes up that request, determines the initial context. Okay, what's the context? What are they looking for? And then it builds a plan. And that plan is used all along this additional process. So this step is absolutely crucial because it sets up that framework or that base for how that request is going to be handled. Okay. Again, this is a whole process that goes on the back end. You don't even realize the things that we have done and developed into this. Next, you can kind of see that plan is then executed, right? On how to get that required data related to what that prompt is or what the context of that prompt is. So it acts as kind of an intermediary that kind of refines, even looks at your prompt, refines it a little bit, adds some context, right? And then builds that around it. And then, which we'll talk about extensibility a little bit more later, which again, I think is super important. Thanks to the extensibility in Copilot for Security, we have what's called plugins. And each one of those plugins is very super smart on that thing that it is intended to utilize. For example, there's a Purview plugin. So if you ask it some kind of Purview question, DLP or whatever, it's going to know. Copilot for Security says, hey, that's a question based on that context and based on that plan. That's a question about Purview. I'm going to interact with this Purview plugin because it's super smart. It's my super intelligent, extra super smart Copilot assistant for Purview. And I'm going to ask it, I'm going to allow it to do its thing. All right. So that's where that comes in. This step actually goes through a deep analysis process and then interprets that data. Finally, as you can see there, okay, the Copilot for Security mechanism combines all that data and all that content and that context, and then that's where our response comes out. So this entire process encapsulates how modern systems can efficiently handle these requests while ensuring that the response is going to be accurate and responsible. All right, so that's just a little, there's actually a lot more that goes into this. If you're ever interested, I talk about this in webinars and conference sessions. If you happen to find me at a conference, we can go much, much deeper into this. So Copilot for Security offers what we call experiences. All right, at Microsoft, we call these experiences. We have what's called a standalone experience and an embedded experience. So these experiences are two very distinct ways of using Copilot for Security. And it's super important to understand the differences because that way you can identify which to use in various scenarios. We actually have these two experiences for very important purposes. And let's talk through those. So Copilot for Security can significantly improve our incident response time. Let's focus on this based on those needs in specific scenarios. So in brief, okay, this standalone experience, which we're going to focus on here first, stands alone as its own existing powerful application. So if you go to securitycopilot.microsoft.com, that's how you access it. That's the standalone version. It provides teams with kind of a broader context to help troubleshoot security issues. And it's the way that our extensibility works to be able to connect you not just with the Microsoft pieces, which we'll talk about in the embedded here shortly, but also your entire environment. Copilot for Security is a framework for connecting your security sources, whether that's a Microsoft Defender or XDR thing, whether it's Purview, whether it's a Microsoft product, but also non-Microsoft products. So this standalone version is what we utilize to be able to give you access. If you don't use Microsoft Sentinel as you're seeing, for example, if you use something like, I don't know, Chronicle or CrowdStrike or something along those lines, if you use those instead of the Microsoft version, you can still use Copilot for Security to connect those through the plugins because we build the plugins based on the intelligence of that original source so that, again, it's a super smart, intelligent assistant so that I can ask questions even of my Chronicle or CrowdStrike environment because those are where our coverage is. Our goal at Microsoft, and you heard that earlier, hopefully, and you kind of caught that, is to ensure that our customers are secure, ensure that our customers, we can help our customers be secure. I don't care if you use our products or not. That kind of sounds strange, probably coming from a Microsoft person. But you can use at least a piece of what we have at Microsoft to enable our customers to be secure around that threat intelligence, those 65 trillion signals, because we believe that's going to ultimately make you more secure and better capable in securing your environments. All right. So then there's this other embedded side, which we'll get to here shortly. This is for team members that already use our tools, specific tools. These seamlessly integrate with existing workflows. So if you're using Endpoint Manager or Intune today, where there's actually an embedded version of that, you may have seen that already. May not enable the license. It's not actually a license for Copilot for Security, but you may have seen that capability or the ability to turn that on. And I'm actually going to show you that here in a little bit. So in this case, think of this as Copilot for Security coming to you. So you go use your tools, but Copilot for Security is actually already there. All right. So let's focus first on the standalone experience. Standalone experiences kind of generally for your security operations center team, or maybe even that lone defender that needs to ask questions or do some hunting. It brings together get signals using that security platform or that extensibility I talked about across Defender, Sentinel, Intune, Enter, Purview, and everything that you have in your environment into this single pane of view. So let's jump over to my environment here really quickly and just walk you through what this looks like. I'm going to start here. Um, Let me jump back here really quick. So you see that little arrow and that link, that short URL, aka.ms/cfs prompt library or Copilot for Security prompt library. So these demos that I'm going to go through right now, these actually come from that. So these demos that I'm doing, these demos that I'm going to walk through, you can actually go through if you're using Copilot for Security or you enable Copilot for Security, you can go back and utilize all of this yourself and see how it works and see that the things that I'm doing here actually absolutely do work in a real world scenario. But there's a lot here also um, in this environment. Hopefully you can see that. I did expand my screen just a little bit. Hopefully that works for you. You can see that it's like 125%. That should be pretty good. If not, please let me know. But these demos out here, like I said, there's so much more here. There's a whole prompt library. There's literally over getting close to like 100 different prompts you can use with Copilot for Security now. But feel free to go out and utilize any of this and take a look and get some ideas and examples around that. The first one I want to do is just using Copilot for Security for threat intelligence, the threat intelligence we've talked about for hunting or hunting operations. If you're familiar with what hunting is, that is the capability. Let me minimize that. Capability to look for potential things or potential security issues within your environment. Understanding that you don't know what you don't know until you know it, or you try to capture or do the research to get that knowledge or information. Most organizations go through hunting operations. The idea is that you hear through Microsoft, you hear through news, or something's reported somewhere that there's this new threat. We've heard over the past week that Iran is trying to infiltrate or hack the United States elections. All right. So Microsoft Threat Intelligence, I promise you, there's going to be something within that about that scenario. So if you want to identify if Iran is somehow trying to infiltrate your own organization, you can use Copilot for Security to do that using that threat intelligence. What I'm going to do here, the way this prompt library is built, you can just literally copy one of these prompts and go into Copilot for Security and paste it in. All right, this one, what I want to show here, this prompt says, hey, summarize, this is my hunting operation, summarize the latest threat intelligence report on ransomware attacks targeting the healthcare sector, right? You can change that to anything you want. Highlighting, and then there's some additional context in this question, highlighting key indicators of compromise and suggested defense strategies. Do we have a question? Somebody saying something? Sorry. So let's go in. I have this run already, so I'm going to run it from here just so we don't have a lot of time. You can see that I've submitted this, right? It chose my Microsoft Threat Intelligence, that plugin or that extensibility, and it did summarize that latest information for me. There's a campaign that's going on now called ransomware campaign against healthcare called Orange Worm. It tells me that Microsoft Defender antivirus detects this, so I'm good if we have the latest sequence of signature files. Here's some ways I can go into my environment and mitigate this, right? Imagine trying to do this all yourself, all right? Imagine trying to ensure that you go through this process. Imagine if you've done this before, this hunting operation. This could take days. Whereas I just typed this into Copilot for Security, it gave me the response. And if I wanted to, I can go read more about this orange worm, but it gave me this response and I have everything I need, not only to know what this thing is, not only to know that, hey, guess what? I am covered if I have these latest signature files, but here's some other things that I can do to ensure that if this thing happens, I'm either notified or I'm covered because I'm already remediated. I've accomplished those steps that have been addressed. All right. Next thing I want to do as we go in here, I think this is super interesting. Next part of our demo, dissecting scripts. Copilot for Security is super intelligent in dissecting files, scripts, any potential signature file. It can create PowerShell scripts for it. It can create KQL, which we're going to talk about here shortly. But I'm going to copy this one again. I'm going to go into Copilot for Security. This is, I'll show you what this looks like. Let's go back here to the main prompt. And I'm going to type this in, right? And I just copied and pasted this in. I could create this on my own if I wanted. But I just tell Copilot for Security, dissect the following script and tell me if it is potentially dangerous. Say this script, I found it on a server somewhere. It just was sitting there. It's kind of suspicious. Or maybe someone received it in an email and they said, hey, I got this really cool PowerShell script. And you're like, where'd you get that from? Right? So I can take that script and stick it into Copilot for Security, and I can ask it, hey, tell me what this is doing and if it might be potentially dangerous. So again, I've run this before just to kind of cut time here. I'm going to run it here just to show you what it looks like. And the response is, it takes that script, it submits it, and it gives me the information. This is a PowerShell script, all right? It was designed to do this, okay? This PowerShell script, if I'm not a PowerShell expert, it's going to say, hey, this is what this PowerShell script was trying to accomplish. Creates a large number of files in a specific directory. And you're thinking, scratching your head going, wow, why would anyone want that PowerShell script? Obviously, there's probably some situations where that might be interesting. But then it breaks it down, every single line, to tell you what it was doing, where it was copying files to, why it was working, what extensions that it was utilizing. So you can go look for that later if you want to do that. And here's the response. As for whether the script is potentially dangerous, and I just mentioned this already, it depends on the context. If you didn't know the script existed out on that server and it was sitting there and you're like, oh my goodness, I see this as part of a process somewhere on the server, it starts to become super suspicious. So it says the script itself is not malicious. It simply creates a large number of files in a specified directory. However, right, so here's that red flag potentially because you didn't know it existed. If used improperly or maliciously, it could potentially fill up a hard drive or be used to create a large number of files for nefarious purposes. So that's actually super cool that Copilot for Security was able to accomplish that for me. The next part of this demo, I want to show you this. KQL, you may be familiar with some of my work, Must Learn KQL, and I've also just recently released a book from Microsoft Press on KQL. I love KQL, right? I super nerdy about it. I will just for whatever purpose, just because I'm strange, just write KQL queries and look for data sometimes because I think it's soothing for me. But Copilot for Security kind of shortcuts some of that operation. Not necessarily that I'm going to always jump in here and use the KQL version of this because again, I'm an inventor. I like to be creative. I like to dig into things, but let's just copy this and just show you how powerful Copilot for Security is even with KQL queries. If you're not experienced in KQL, you don't necessarily have to be. Copilot for Security does a good job of developing KQL queries. Is it perfect? No, but it's going to get you to that point, and eventually it will be perfect. So here's my way of querying Copilot for Security. Generate this KQL query, but not just generate a KQL query. I'm using Microsoft Sentinel. Please tell me how to take that query and create a Microsoft Analytics rule or create a KQL query that could be used as a Microsoft Sentinel Analytics rule. Let's see. Did I run this? Yeah, there it is. Let's go ahead and run this real quick from my previous sessions. Again, just so it doesn't see, because originally it took 38 seconds, but because it's a session, because it's cached, I can go back and review this. Sessions, by the way, are retained indefinitely until you provide some maintenance on those yourself. So here's the KQL query that I asked for, right? Here's KQL query I can use for an analytics rule that alerts when a user logs in unsuccessfully more than 20 times in an hour and then logs in successfully, which to me seems like kind of a suspicious event or scenario. Maybe they forgot their password the first couple times, but that if they try it 20 times in an hour, that might potentially be a potential brute force attack, right? And then all of a sudden they log in successfully, somebody guessed that password. So that to me sounds super interesting and something I'd want to look into. So it created the KQL query for me. I can take that, I can run it in Sentinel, and it's going to produce that information that I requested. But then also it's going to give me the information around how to utilize that in an analytics rule. And it tells me how to create that analytics rule. If I'm For example, if I've been hired in as a summer intern at some organization, I may not be as versed in Microsoft Sentinel as the entire team at that organization, but I want to be part of that team and I want to do well and be and learn about cybersecurity. This is going to give me the information as the person that's not familiar with Microsoft Sentinel to actually go through these exact steps to do that. Another piece of this, last part of this demo for this part of the standalone, there's also this using external sources for intelligence. This to me is super powerful. I can use things like public URLs. I can use things like, hey, ask the Microsoft docs, use the Microsoft documentation that Microsoft has created to do something for me or look for this information. So I can do that. For example, if I do use Microsoft docs and tell me about this, we're getting short on time, so I want to kind of hustle this up. Use Microsoft docs to tell me how to create that analytics rule. So if we go into this, yeah, chose Microsoft documentation. It actually went out to the Microsoft documentation on the web and it produced this information for me. So it's a little bit more detailed than what was part of the response before. But again, I can do some other things like that. Last piece of this, again, to show you just how powerful it is to be able to utilize external information. If you're not familiar, out on GitHub, we have our IP ranges for all of our Azure services. So I'm going to use the public URL, which is updated continually in the Microsoft GitHub repository. And I want to ask what's the IP addresses for Azure AD, because maybe I've seen some potentially suspect IP addresses in the reporting or monitoring I've been doing within security. And you can see here that it actually goes out and pulls in all of those Azure AD IP addresses from that external source. All right, so actually pretty cool. Let's switch back over to my slide deck. Again, we're running up on time. Again, I told you earlier that this is kind of a complex and lengthy discussion, but let's talk about this embedded experience. And I want to jump through this really quickly. Microsoft Security is embedded in all of these different products, things like Defender XDR, Sentinel Purview, Intra, Intune, and all of the others are on the way. So let's jump back over to my environment just to show you a couple of these. You may have seen Copilot for Security within the Defender console. So if I happen to go into, for example, here's some things I have in my incidents in our SIEM and XDR platform. Successful login IP and failure from a different IP involving one user. So instead of going into the standalone version and trying to think of what my prompt might be, trying to get extra creative, you'll see here that Copilot for Security automatically starts within a Defender. If you have Copilot for Security enabled, automatically starts this for me. It takes a look at this information or this incident, and it automatically is going to generate a summary of things that it thinks that I should go take a look at based on what this context of this thing is, right? So this is actually pretty cool. I can close this if I want and go back and do my own investigation, but why not start from here and take a look at this? It gives me a little bit more information about credential access, talks about that failed IP, talks about who that account is, and then it's going to give me a guided response. But again, we're running up on time. I'll let that run in the background as we do that, but I think my favorite, what I wanted to point out here as part of this, which I think is super important, my favorite implementation right now of Copilot for Security is the Intune implementation, because not only do you not have to type in a prompt or get creative, figure out what your prompt is, it gives you some of the more common prompts. So I've gone into Intune and I've looked up this device, and if you saw that, if you looked at that device, it is not compliant, and I want to find out why it's not compliant. So if I go right into this device and I want to explore the Copilot, I choose to use Copilot for Security, then it's going to give me all of the more common prompts. It's going to guide me. It's almost like one of those guided stories. So it's going to guide me through the prompts, so I don't even have to guess what the prompts are. This is absolutely one of my favorite implementations of that. All right, again, I do want to end our discussion on this, right? we talked about that security platform or that platform extensibility platform. So while we generally refer to Copilot for Security as a security tool, it's actually much, much more than that. In fact, in addition to its inclusion of Microsoft's threat intelligence, which makes it already that super security smart that I talked about, the extensibility ensures that the intelligence is always evolving, and you can actually create your own plugins. Very super simple and easy to do that. So I talked earlier about the extensibility. So in this ever-evolving realm of cybersecurity, having this reliable guide is essential, and enabling it to evolve always and be part of your environment is super essential. We have out of the box access to all of these different plugins from all of these. You'll notice a lot of these individual companies. Tanium is on there. If you're familiar with Tanium, all of these partners are working on solutions or have solutions already that you can literally just go into Copilot for Security and enable that plugin. Plugin types, again, I said you can create your own. You can utilize any API. In fact, I've created a bunch of plugins myself. Very super simple and easy to do. We provide plugins in our GitHub templates in our GitHub repository that you can literally just copy that plugin and insert your own information like the API and key information, utilizing just the GPT services for Azure OpenAI or OpenAI. And also you can create plugins based on KQL, which is absolutely my favorite, because if you come out with a really good KQL query, you can put that into a plugin. So you're always going to return that information that's completely trusted. Purview, the plugin for Purview is in public preview right now. I actually checked my environment earlier and it's not quite there yet. So that's continuing to roll out. And I did want to highlight that because of the content and theme of this conference. So that's rolling out here shortly. And when you are able to get access to that, you literally just go into Copilot for Security. And we can go down here into our plugins or sources and find Microsoft Purview and enable. You can see that it's listed there and it's enabled, but right now the functionality and feature capability is not quite 100% there, but like I said, it is rolling out here shortly. So that's something that you can take and look for. So really quickly, and I know we're just a little bit over, and maybe we could still take time for some questions. And if you don't have questions, or if you do have questions, we don't have time, please feel free to connect with me after. So we've dove into the deep end, obviously, for the real world impact of Microsoft Copilot for Security. So you can see these testimonials that have come from our customers here about Copilot for Security. But just a quick summary. Through its single pane view, it saves time in various ways. That in security intelligence that we talked about makes your own organization more intelligent on security. You can see here some of these examples of what Copilot can do for you. We've shown some examples today, just a little bit. But again, I want to, which I think is super important, focus on this piece, right? In this dynamic world of teamwork, not everybody can have a team, right? And you still have to kind of focus on efficiency and focus on those things that matter. Copilot for Security enables you to do that, right? So even if you're a lone defender focused on all these other things, but you still have to do security, this is going to help you with that. Copilot for Security, with it, you can enable even less experienced team members perform tasks that are normally kind of reserved for what we think of mid to expert level analyst, right? It's going to reduce experienced analyst fatigue, right? So those things that even experienced analysts, those that are experts in security that normally do, this is going to shortcut your processes. You're not going to have to spend as much time on that, so you can do more things and do and look at the environment in a much better and more informed way. And then Copilot for Security is also going to help you build your policies around. You may not have policies around how you might potentially respond to a critical situation in your environment. You may just respond just based off of the cuff or impromptu. When something happens, oh, I have to drop everything. We have to focus on this. This is going to help you produce policies and procedures and give you a task list of things that are going to help you build better efficiency around the things that you do every single day. So I'm happy to take questions now if we have time. Do we have time for that? Or absolutely find me to discuss after the session, but Thank
Well,
you so much for your time today.
can take it just a couple of minutes, maybe 2 more minutes more to take some
Yeah,
of the questions. Yeah,
excellent.
we just go to
Yeah,
the chat. Yeah.
looking through these. Copilot for the copilots. I love that. You'll actually be interested. I'm working on a project right now, Copilot for the copilots, but I can't share too much about it right now, but we'll see that. Reminds me of the Acolyte. You can prepare yourself. Okay, quiz. Have there been considerations around developing approval workflows for when prompts are sent in CFS? So that's a good question. Developing approval workflows. You can do that today, and some of our customers have, and we've worked with customers doing that internally. It's not something that's built into Copilot for Security, and probably will not or may not, at least for a long while. Our stance behind copilots is that it's an assistant. It's not something that takes over and does things for you. We're providing guidance and suggestive recommendations, right? That's just the way that we feel with AI. Now, there are some things you can do. For example, you can utilize the Power apps, or you can utilize Logic apps to provide that workflow. So based on a Logic app runs, it looks at that Copilot for Security recommendation or that prompt that you have built. And then based on that response, it may react or do something. So that would be that action or that workflow would be based on Logic app. So I always think of workflows in relation to like Teams or Slack or something like that. That's where that stuff kind of accumulates or gets aggregated. So you could have a Logic app that based on that response for Copilot for Security, based on that prompt and based on that response, it then creates that workflow in Teams. So you can have little checklists and task lists and stuff like that. So that capability is there today, but you utilize those other products based on, again, that extensibility. We're trying to create a platform that people can utilize. There's a question, will an E5 license give you all of these security for Copilot experiences, or do you need a specific? So Copilot for Security is not a license. Anyone can use Copilot for Security. And again, going back to that original that comment about we want to enable our customers to secure themselves no matter what they use, no matter what product that they utilize for security. We just want to help them be secure. This is not a license. Copilot for Security is priced differently. It's based on consumption, much like if you're familiar with Azure or any cloud service, it's more like a utility. So it's based on how much or how little that you use. Copilot for Security, when you go to securitycopilot.microsoft.com today and you've never used it before, it's going to walk you through creating what's called a security compute unit. Depending on your usage, you may need one or you may need more security compute units. You'll determine that over time, but it is based on a compute unit, right? But a security compute unit. And if you're familiar with AI or generative AI at all, it runs in these massive data centers and it's based on compute. And there is based on the prompt is based on a whole token calculation. There's tokens involved, and there's a whole calculation that goes on that it is addressable to those compute units. So again, you go out to securitycopilot.microsoft.com, it walk you through creating a SCU or security compute unit. So it's not even a license at all. And you don't even need an E5 license to do that. You may already have an E5 license if you're using Intune or something like that, or in our Defender products, you probably already have that, right? But again, we want our customers, even the non-Microsoft customers, to be able to utilize this. Hopefully that helps. And Heike said it was a separate license, but again, it's not really a license. But and then the SU behind Copilot for Security exhaust easily after a few pumps. And so there is that comment about yes, and that's why I mentioned over time you will determine exactly what your security compute unit, what it will be recommended for your own environment. We recommend X, but based on your usage, you'll make that better determination in the next quarter, sometime soon. When you go into Copilot for Security, there's already a dashboard that shows you the metrics around your SCU usage, right? But it's super archaic at this point. So that was like one of the last things that we thought of when we created Copilot for Security which to me sounds silly because I'm a data guy. I love monitoring. I love metrics. That would have been one of the first things I did, but I'm not the product team. Um, but this quarter here, very shortly, we're going to have a whole dashboard where you'll not only be able to see the metrics around your SEU or SEU spikes, but you'll also be able to see where those spikes came, who utilized it, who actually used it, because obviously you give people access based on access control within Copilot for Security. You give people access or keep them from having access or give only the right people access. So you might have 5 or 6 people utilizing Copilot for Security every day as part of your security team. It would be super nice to know who used it in certain respects and scenarios. So that dashboard is actually coming. To do consumption model. Hope I'm not wanting to miss anything. How do I activate a trial? I mentioned that, Manuel. Just go to securitycopilot.microsoft.com. There's no such thing as a Copilot for Security trial. You do need to run an SCU for a period of time to, again, determine how much or how little that you use. So there's really no trial. The trial is actually using it. So there's nothing, I apologize for that, because it is based on consumption. It's not actually free. Even when you do that, just kind of be prepared for that. Parav asked, will the price for SCU at CFS usage go down? Right now, even one SCU. Yep. So there's that pricing. If you go to Copilot for Security, you can, on the Microsoft site, you can look at our pricing. I'll be super honest. I'm not a pricing guy. I'm not a licensing guy. I know about these things only because I'm asked these things and I have to have a response to those. But I am super hesitant to always discuss pricing because, again, I'm not a salesperson. I'm not here to sell you on anything. I talk about these things because I love them, because I use them and I think they're super valuable. I do pay, I have to tell you this. Incidentally, I do pay for my own Copilot for Security environment because I want to use it. I think it's super cool. And I do pay for one SCU per month. All right. And as Parav said in the comments there, you'll say the question, will the pricing go down? Because it says right now, even one SCU is like 4K a month. Actually, one SCU is not 4K a month. One SCU would be right around, I think it's $12.95 US. And I promise you that's the pricing. It's like $4 per hour for an SCU running 24/7. A good friend of mine, an MVP, Morton, has written a PowerShell script that will actually go out and you run it. It will spin up an SCU. I'm not saying we support this at Microsoft, but it will spin up an SCU. And then when you're done, it will spin it down. You're not charged for an SCU if it's not running. Okay. And so if you want to use an SCU for an hour for $4, or you want to use 4 SCUs for an hour for $16, you can do that. And then spin it down. Again, not supported by Microsoft. But the question was, will the pricing go down? We are working on pricing. And you'll notice even we did this with Microsoft Sentinel. When a product is initially released, we have in our mind what we think based on, and a lot of people don't realize, there's a conversation and a partnership that goes on within Microsoft between the various teams that produce and manage these various services to come up with a price. And sometimes that discussion is heated, and sometimes it doesn't come out exactly the way that it should. However, Copilot for Security is the same as it was with Microsoft Sentinel. You even saw just the past couple of weeks, there's improved pricing on data ingestion for Microsoft Sentinel. We will do the same with Copilot for Security. I promise. I've seen things. I can't talk about things, but pricing will, I believe, improve and do a lot better. I don't see any other questions. Did anyone have anything that I did not answer?
I think we can take the questions in the chat, Rod, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
We go ahead and start the quest. All right, folks. So we are at the end of the session, but now it's the time for the test. We got to check what you have learned today, right? So which means it's time for the quiz. So let me call upon Shrishti, who would be the host for the quiz. So Shrishti, you there?
Hey, hi Vignesh. Hello everyone. What an
Yeah.
insightful session by Rod. Loved it. Yeah. So maybe
Thank
let
you,
me
Rod,
just,
for that.
quickly,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much, Rod. Even
Well,
the
thank you all
enthusiasm.
for having me. I truly appreciate it. I love when people invite me to talk about the things I love to talk about. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll quickly share my screen so that everyone can.
Yeah. And folks, just quick disclaimer. So unfortunately, if at all, if you're a winner for this quiz and if you're living outside India, we won't be able to ship the goodie to you. I know that's kind of a bummer, but we don't really have the budget for that at this point. So what I'm trying to say is you're more than welcome to participate in the quiz, but if at all you get to be in the first three places, and if you're living outside India, we won't be able to ship the goodie to you. Just letting you know. All right. All right. Yeah, Heike,
Okay.
you can win for others. Yeah, you can definitely do that.
Speakers are not like, yeah, you can win for others for sure, Heike, but speakers are not, not eligible.
Oh, damn it. I mean, I don't think I know a single answer, but
Oh, okay.
Cool. Quickly, I'll walk you through the guidelines, and probably if you have not seen this yet in the chat, I'll post it again, the link and the code. Quick guideline, you'll all have to sign up to the Conf Hub, and most probably you should use your first name and last name so that we can identify you if you win the prizes. And we have 20 questions for you with 10 seconds for you to answer. And a short, a disclaimer, chances are higher if you try to answer in less time. So keep that in mind. All the best, and I hope you enjoy the quiz. But before that, I'll again post this in the chat so that those who missed out can go ahead and just, oops, my bad. Give me the thumbs up once everyone is done, or just type in yes so that I can start the quiz. We'll wait for 2 more minutes and then we'll start.
All right.